Do you know there is only one man in the Bible who died, was buried for 4 days, and then walked out of the tomb at the sound of a single voice? A man who didn't perform miracles, didn't preach to crowds, and never wrote a single word, yet became one of the most powerful witnesses to Jesus Christ. His story is not loud, but it echoes through centuries. It is a story of silence, friendship, suffering, and hope rising from the grave. This is the story of Lazarus of Bethany, the beloved friend of Christ, who was called from the darkness of the tomb back into the light of life. Before beginning, drop an amen in the comments, like this video, and subscribe for more stories of the saints. Don't forget to share it so others may discover this story and be inspired to live holier lives. Chapter 1. Family and Childhood in Bethany. In the quiet village of Bethany, nestled along the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives, a humble home stood as a beacon of warmth and peace. There, Lazarus grew up in the embrace of a devout Jewish household. Surrounded by olive trees and the distant view of Jerusalem's temple, he learned early to love silence, to revere the law of Moses, and to listen closely when the scriptures were read aloud each evening by the lamp. Lazarus was the elder brother of 2 women whose names would live on in the memory of the church, Martha and Mary. The 3 siblings formed a close and inseparable bond. While Martha often took the lead in daily affairs and Mary found joy in quiet reflection, Lazarus provided a gentle and steady presence. He led not with words but with example, offering calm strength, carrying burdens without complaint, and always thinking first of others. Their home quickly became known for its generous hospitality. Though modest in appearance, it welcomed neighbors, travelers, and the poor with the same care. The table was always set with what they had, and their door never turned away a guest. What made their hospitality remarkable was not wealth, but love. Guests left feeling nourished not only in body, but in spirit. The peace within those walls lingered long after visitors departed. The siblings' daily life was centered around faith. They observed the Sabbath with reverence, prayed the Psalms morning and night, and traveled to the temple on feast days. But their piety was not rigid or showy. It was lived with quiet devotion. Faith shaped the way they spoke, served, and gave. For Lazarus especially, belief was expressed not in loud prayers, but in the way he treated others with dignity and mercy. Although their household was stable and well provided for, they chose to live simply. Possessions were not clung to, and comfort was never placed above compassion. Lazarus often went quietly into the village with bread or oil for a struggling widow or stranger. He gave freely, never seeking notice. He believed that if God had blessed him, it was only right to bless others. His generosity flowed from a deep well of trust in divine providence. Over time, their home became a place of quiet refuge. People felt safe there, not only because of food or shelter, but because of the spirit of kindness that filled the space. It was not unusual for neighbors to stop by with questions, worries, or simply the need to sit in silence. Though no signs marked it as special, the home of Lazarus, Martha, and Mary became a resting place for weary souls. Even as a young man, Lazarus was marked by stillness and depth. He was not a man of many words, yet his presence spoke peace. He had no title, no desire for attention, but his compassion was unmistakable. Those who knew him found themselves drawn to his quiet strength. In the hidden life of Bethany, a soul was quietly being formed, one that would bear witness to something far greater than himself. Chapter 2. The Encounter and Friendship with Jesus. The first time Jesus entered the village of Bethany, his presence stirred quiet wonder. He came not with noise or spectacle, but with a peaceful authority that drew people in. It was during his journey through Judea, teaching and healing, that he met the 3 siblings, Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. From that first visit, something unspoken passed between them, a spiritual recognition, as if their hearts had been waiting for this meeting. Lazarus and his sisters welcomed Jesus into their home with the warmth they offered all guests. But there was something different about this man. In Jesus, Lazarus sensed more than wisdom. He sensed truth. Their conversations, often unhurried and sincere, quickly gave rise to a deep and mutual friendship. Lazarus, not one to speak often, found in Jesus a companion who understood silence and valued the quiet loyalty of a faithful heart. Bethany soon became a familiar place for the Lord. Whenever he drew near to Jerusalem, Jesus would stop at the home of Lazarus. It was more than hospitality, it was a haven. In their home, Jesus found not only food and rest, but love without expectation. For the three siblings, his arrival was never routine. Martha prepared meals with care, Mary listened at his feet, and Lazarus simply remained near, present in quiet companionship. Lazarus rarely spoke much when Jesus taught. He preferred to listen, his gaze steady, his spirit open. While Martha bustled with service and Mary sat captivated by every word, Lazarus sat close, absorbing without interruption. His presence was steady, like a tree rooted by the stream. He did not seek the spotlight, nor did he ask for signs. He simply believed because he knew Jesus, and knowing him was enough. Over time, the bond between Lazarus and Jesus deepened. What began as welcome grew into kinship of the soul. There was no need for titles or explanations. They were friends, not friends of convenience or flattery, but of shared understanding. Jesus saw into Lazarus's heart and found there no pretense, only trust. In return, Lazarus gave his heart without reserve, not as a disciple following a master, but as one friend walking beside another. Jesus would return to Bethany often not just to preach, but to rest, to laugh, to share moments of stillness. He shared meals, stories, even tears within those walls. In a world where he was often misunderstood, in Bethany he was simply loved. For the Lord, their home was not just a place, it was a sanctuary, a space where he could breathe freely, even for a little while. Among all who knew him, Lazarus held a special place in Jesus' heart, not because he was great in the world's eyes, but because he was true. Lazarus asked for nothing, gave everything, and stayed close when others drew back. In time, the Gospels would speak of him in a rare way, not as a prophet or apostle, but as the one whom Jesus loved. And truly, he was. Chapter 3. The sudden illness and painful death. It began without warning. One morning, Lazarus was slower to rise, his steps less certain. His sisters noticed the change immediately, but neither imagined it would become grave. As the day passed, his strength faded, his breath shortened. He lay down and could not rise again. Martha tried herbal remedies, Mary prayed beside him. Their quiet home, once filled with laughter and stillness, became a place of worry, hushed tones, and fearful glances. Knowing the danger, they sent a message with haste. Lord, the one you love, is ill. They trusted Jesus deeply and believed he would come. His presence had brought healing to others. Surely he would not delay for Lazarus. As hours turned into a day, and that day into two, the sisters kept watch. They waited, scanning the path from the hills, their hearts full of longing, hope, and rising concern. But Jesus did not come. Though he received the message, he remained where he was, saying only, "This illness will not end in death." Yet in Bethany, time moved forward, and with each passing hour, Lazarus slipped further away. The house grew quieter, his breathing slowed. Then came the final breath. The sisters stood still, unable to stop what had come. Their brother, their constant companion, was gone. Following the customs of their people, they prepared his body with spices and linen, hands trembling through every movement. Neighbors came with words of comfort, but nothing could fill the silence he left behind. They carried him to a tomb outside the village, a cave cut into stone, and sealed it with a heavy rock. Just like that, The stillness became permanent. The one they loved now lay in darkness. The people of Bethany wept. Lazarus had been known and cherished. He was gentle, generous, steady. His absence left a void no one could fill. Friends gathered at the home, bringing bread, tears, and memories. But Martha and Mary moved through the days like shadows present, but hollowed. Their grief was deep, not only for what had been lost, but for the absence of the one they had hoped would come. Still, in the midst of the sorrow, Martha held to something unshaken. Her heart, though heavy, whispered truths she would not let go of. God sees, she told herself. God hears. Even when the road remained empty, even when the tomb was closed, her faith held fast. It was not without pain, but it was real, a quiet defiance against despair planted deep within her soul. Death, for many, feels like the end. The sealed tomb seems to declare, hope has no place here. But God's ways are not our ways. His timing is often hidden, and his plans stretch beyond the grasp of our sorrow. Though Lazarus lay in the grave and Jesus had not yet arrived, the story was far from over. A greater glory was drawing near, just beyond the reach of grief. Chapter 4. The shocking miracle of resurrection. 4 days had passed. The tomb was closed, the mourning had settled, and hope seemed buried with Lazarus. But then, word spread through the village. Jesus was near. Martha rushed to meet him, tears still fresh on her face. Mary followed soon after. Seeing their sorrow, Jesus was deeply moved. He did not speak quickly. He wept. Before the miracle, before the command, the Son of God first shared in his friend's grief. They led him to the tomb, a cave cut into the rock, sealed with a heavy stone. "Take away the stone," Jesus said. Martha hesitated. "Lord, it has been 4 days. There will be a stench." But he looked at her gently and said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" Trusting, she gave the nod. The stone was rolled away, and the tomb lay open to the light. Jesus lifted his eyes and prayed aloud, not for himself, but for those around him. "Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know you always hear me, but I say this for the sake of those standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." There was silence. The crowd watched. Some covered their mouths, others held their breath. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. All eyes were fixed on the dark opening. Then came the words that would echo through eternity, "Lazarus, come out." The voice rang with power, yet tenderness. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then, from within the tomb, came the sound of shuffling. A figure emerged, still wrapped in burial cloths, hands and feet bound, face covered. Lazarus, who had died, was now alive. Jesus turned and said, "Unbind him and let him go." Awe fell over the crowd. The people were stunned. Some fell to their knees, others backed away in fear. Murmurs spread like wildfire through Bethany and beyond. Many believed in Jesus that day, not because of a teaching, but because of what they saw with their own eyes. Yet not all hearts were open. A few slipped away quietly and reported everything to the religious authorities in Jerusalem. Light had shone, but shadows stirred as well. This was no ordinary healing. It was the greatest sign, yet the final public miracle before Jesus' passion. In calling Lazarus from the tomb, Jesus revealed his authority over death itself. It was a foreshadowing of what was to come, his own resurrection, not by calling another, but by rising through the power of the Father. The raising of Lazarus was both gift and prophecy, a glimpse of glory veiled in flesh. Lazarus returned not as he had been before, but as a living witness. Every step he took, every breath he drew, proclaimed the mercy of God. He bore no grand speeches, only presence. His life became the testimony. People no longer spoke of death as the final word. In Lazarus, they saw the face of one who had passed through the grave and come back touched by the love of Christ. Chapter 5. The spread of the news and rising persecution. Word spread quickly. Within days of the miracle, the story of Lazarus being raised from the dead was on every tongue throughout Judea. People came from nearby towns just to see him, to look into the eyes of the man who had once lain 4 days in a tomb. In markets, along roadsides, and even in the courtyards of the temple, voices whispered and exclaimed, "He lives! Lazarus lives!" Hope was stirring, but so was fear. For many, the miracle confirmed everything they had dared to believe about Jesus. Could this be the Messiah? Who else could call the dead back to life? Hearts opened, and belief took root in unexpected places. But not everyone rejoiced. Among the chief priests and Pharisees, concern turned to alarm. If Jesus continued gathering followers, they feared losing their power, and worse, drawing the wrath of the Roman authorities. The Sanhedrin, the ruling council of the Jews, gathered in urgent debate. The raising of Lazarus had shaken their fragile balance of influence. "If we let him go on like this," they said, "everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and destroy our temple and our nation." So they resolved to act. From that moment, their plan was not only to kill Jesus, but to kill Lazarus as well. Lazarus had become more than a man, he was a sign. His very existence threatened the status quo. He didn't need to speak. Simply walking through a village was enough to challenge hardened hearts. He became a living testimony, and testimony is powerful. So spies watched him. Strangers followed him. There were whispers in alleyways and stares that lingered too long. The man once dead was now dangerously alive. For his safety, Lazarus withdrew from Bethany. The home that once offered peace had become a place of risk. Friends helped him find shelter. He moved quietly, avoiding attention. It pained him to leave his sisters and his village, but he trusted in the will of God. He knew he could not silence the miracle, nor would he try. His life was not his own anymore. It belonged to the one who called him forth. Despite his absence, the story of what happened could not be erased. It had been seen, heard, and passed from mouth to mouth like fire through dry grass. No decree could stop it, no threat could bury it again. The name Lazarus became a word of wonder, a spark of conversation that led hearts toward deeper questions. His story had entered the world, and it was not going away. And for many, seeing or hearing about Lazarus was the beginning of faith. He was proof that God's power was real and near. People who had doubted began to pray. Those who had feared began to hope. Lazarus didn't preach from synagogues or write scrolls. His life was the sermon. In him, the gospel was alive, walking, breathing, quietly inviting others to believe in the one who brings life out of death. Chapter 6. Exile and the journey to Cyprus. The time had come for Lazarus to leave his homeland. He did not go in fear, but in faith, trusting that God would lead him where he was needed most. Quietly, without farewell or fanfare, he boarded a small boat and set sail across the sea. The wind pressed against the sails as the shoreline faded behind him. His heart ached for Bethany, but peace went with him. His life now belonged fully to the one who called him forth. The boat drifted across the waters until it reached the island of Cyprus. There, in the ancient city of Kishon, Lazarus found safe harbor. The people of the city welcomed him with curiosity and kindness, unaware of the story he carried within. He lived simply, working with his hands, keeping to himself, and offering prayers for the land that had become his refuge. For a time, he remained hidden, a soul in waiting. But light cannot remain hidden for long. Whispers of his past began to spread. Some recognized him, others simply wondered. Then, according to ancient tradition, the apostles, perhaps Paul or Barnabas, came to Cyprus and discerned in Lazarus the grace of a shepherd. With prayer and the laying on of hands, they ordained him as Bishop of Kishon. The man who once walked from the tomb now walked as a pastor among the people. Lazarus began his ministry quietly. He spoke with gentleness and listened without hurry. He told no stories to glorify himself. Instead, he spoke of Jesus, the one who called him by name, the one who wept, the one who raised him. His presence carried weight, not because of status, but because of what he had endured. The people sensed that he had known something holy and mysterious, and that made them listen. His witness bore fruit. Many came to believe, not because of dramatic signs, but because of his living testimony. He did not preach with eloquence, but with depth. He laid hands on the sick, comforted widows, and baptized new believers. His compassion softened hearts. His prayers brought healing. His eyes, marked by both sorrow and hope, told the story without words. Death is not the end. The Christian community in Kishon began to grow. Homes became house churches. Families gathered to pray and break bread. Persecution still loomed in distant lands, but on this island a light had been lit. Lazarus led with humility and perseverance. He asked for nothing, expected little, and gave everything. People followed, not because they were commanded, but because they were drawn. What began as exile became mission. What started in silence became a song of hope. Under Lazarus's quiet leadership, the faith took root in Cyprus and flourished. Through him, the God of life reached into a pagan land and planted seeds of eternity. In the man who once lay in a tomb, a church began to rise quietly, steadily, and forever marked by resurrection. Chapter 7. The Quiet Miracles of a Shepherd. In the years that followed his arrival in Cyprus, the name of Lazarus continued to stir quiet awe. Though he spoke little of what had happened in Bethany, people came to him with reverence. They sought not spectacle, but solace. They asked for his prayers, hoping that the same God who once called him from the tomb might also touch their pain. And slowly, stories began to spread, gentle testimonies, shared in whispers, wrapped in faith. It is said that one day, a blind man came to him, led by his young daughter. The man had heard of Lazarus not as a healer, but as someone close to Jesus. He asked for a blessing, nothing more. Lazarus placed his hand gently on the man's head and whispered a prayer. The man opened his eyes and saw. No one shouted, no crowds gathered, only quiet tears flowed as father and daughter embraced. Others came too, a mother carrying her feverish child, a widow weighed down by grief, a man paralyzed from injury. Lazarus never promised healing. He simply prayed, laid hands, and left the rest to God. Some were restored, others found peace. He never kept count, never called them miracles. He only pointed upward, reminding each heart that it was Christ who worked through love. One day, a stranger from a distant village, a pagan man, arrived on crutches. His body bore years of pain, but his heart was open. He asked Lazarus, "What power lives in you?" Lazarus responded, "Not in me, but in the one who raised me." He prayed over the man. Days later, the man returned, walking freely. More than his limbs, his soul had been touched. He asked for baptism and brought others with him. Lazarus never spoke of these things as wonders. When people praised him, he gently turned their gaze elsewhere. "The Lord lives," he would say, "and he listens to the cry of the lowly." His humility made his prayers more powerful. People did not follow him out of curiosity, but out of faith. The ones he touched became messengers themselves, carrying stories of mercy to places he could not go. Even children seemed to recognize something holy in his presence. They would sit at his feet as he blessed them, often in silence. Parents brought their sick, their anxious, their broken-hearted, not to be amazed, but to be consoled. Lazarus offered no ceremonies, no signs to impress, only open hands, a listening heart, and faith rooted in resurrection. Somehow, that was more than enough. And so, in the quiet hills of Kishon, miracles bloomed like wildflowers, not loud, not planned, but real. Through the simple prayers of a man who once lay in darkness, the light of Christ continued to shine. Lazarus remained hidden to the world, but known deeply by heaven, and those who came near him left, changed not because of what they saw, but because of what they believed. Chapter 8, The Second Death and the Eternal Return. Years passed quietly in Kishon. Lazarus, now older, continued to serve with the same gentleness and strength that had marked his life since the day he arrived. He prayed often, walked slowly, and smiled easily. His beard had grayed, his hands trembled slightly, and his steps became shorter. Yet even in weakness, his presence brought comfort. Those around him began to sense what he himself already knew. The time of his departure was drawing near. Lazarus did not fear this second death. He had already tasted the grave and known the one who calls life from darkness. Now, he prepared not with fear, but with reverence. He spent his last days in prayer, in silence, and in blessing those who came to see him. He asked for nothing, demanded nothing. Instead, he gave thanks. To his closest companions, he spoke softly of hope, of mercy, and of the joy awaiting him in the Father's house. Gathering the faithful one final time, Lazarus offered words of encouragement. "Do not fear death," he said, "for Christ has already passed through it. Live in love, remain faithful, walk humbly, and trust in the one who calls each of us by name." His voice was weaker than before, but his words carried weight. They were not parting commands, but a father's blessing spoken with tenderness and truth. On the day he died, the sky was clear and still. Lazarus lay upon a simple mat, hands folded in prayer. His breathing slowed, and his lips moved gently in praise. Those present said there was peace in the room, like the hush of a sanctuary. Without struggle, without fear, Lazarus surrendered his spirit to God. The one who had once stepped from a tomb now stepped into glory, with no need to return. The people of Kishon mourned deeply, not as those without hope, but as those saying farewell to a beloved friend. They prepared his body with honor, singing psalms and offering prayers. He was buried near the church he had served, among those he had shepherded with patience and love. Flowers were placed at his tomb. The faithful gathered in silence, each heart full of both sorrow and thanksgiving. Many believed that Lazarus, who had once been raised in the body, was now fully alive in the spirit. His second death was not a defeat, but a homecoming. No longer a sign pointing toward resurrection, he now lived within that promise. His soul, shaped by silence and service, had returned to the source of all life. For the people, his absence became presence felt not with eyes, but in faith. A stone was placed to mark his grave. Upon it were carved simple words, "Lazarus, friend of Christ." No titles, no honors, just the truth, and that was enough. For all who passed by, it was a reminder not only of a man once raised from the dead, but of the one who raises all. Lazarus had gone home, not to Bethany or Cyprus, but to the eternal embrace of the one who once wept at his tomb. Chapter 9. Legacy and Veneration Through the Centuries. Long after his death, the presence of Lazarus continued to echo through the hills of Kishon. His tomb became a place of quiet pilgrimage, where generations came not to marvel at stone, but to be reminded of the living God. They knelt beside his resting place, seeking peace, healing, and hope. For many, it was enough to be near the bones of one who had once heard the voice of Christ and stepped out of darkness into light. Stories spread of healing and conversion at the tomb. Some left their walking sticks behind. Others found comfort, for wounds no medicine could reach. No official record tallied these graces, but hearts were stirred and lives were changed. It was not the stone that held power, but the memory, the witness of a man who had died, lived again, and now rested in silent communion with the Lord he loved. In the 9th century, Emperor Leo VI of Byzantium ordered Lazarus's relics to be brought to Constantinople. The transfer was done with reverence, marked by prayer and procession. A grand church was built in the capital, where the faithful could venerate the friend of Christ. Yet Cyprus mourned the loss. Eventually, part of his relics were returned, and the church of Saint Lazarus was built over his original tomb in Larnaca. It still stands today, a house of prayer and memory. Throughout history, churches across Europe and the Near East were dedicated in his name. From France to Italy, from Greece to Syria, his memory was kept alive, not by power, but by love. His story appeared in medieval stained glass, Byzantine icons, illuminated manuscripts, and sacred hymns. In every image, he emerges from the tomb, wrapped in burial cloths, eyes lifted to the light, an image not of death, but of divine promise. Eastern churches honor him on Lazarus Saturday, the day before Palm Sunday, recalling the miracle that prepared hearts for Holy Week. The Latin Church remembers him as a saint and bishop, a quiet shepherd, and a bold sign of hope. He is invoked by the sick, the dying, and those who feel forgotten, those who wait for their own name to be called out of suffering and into peace. Across time and tradition, one title endures above all: Lazarus, friend of Christ. It is carved on his tomb, sung in chants, and whispered in prayer. He was not an apostle, not a martyr, not a teacher, but he was loved. And in that love, he became a vessel of grace. His friendship with Jesus became the seed of his sanctity, reminding us all that holiness begins in relationship. Today, as pilgrims light candles in Cyprus or sing ancient hymns in far-off chapels, the legacy of Lazarus continues to speak. It speaks not of greatness achieved, but of grace received. His life and death, and life again, remains a sign that in Christ nothing is lost and no voice is unheard. Through one man's quiet story, the church still hears the echo: Lazarus, come forth. Chapter 10. Those who bear his name, Lazarus. Throughout history, the name Lazarus has become more than a memory. It has become a symbol. It carries with it the weight of resurrection, of second chances, of the tender power of Christ. Though Lazarus himself left behind no writings, no recorded teachings, his name continues to live on in people, in places, and in stories shaped by mercy. To bear his name is to live in quiet defiance of despair. In the 12th century, amid the chaos of the Crusades, a group of knights formed what would become the Order of Saint Lazarus. Unlike others, they were known not for conquest, but for compassion. Many of its members had contracted leprosy and chose to spend their lives serving those who shared the same fate. They carried no banners of glory, only the green cross and the name of Lazarus, friend of the one who heals. Over time, the name Lazarus came to be attached to hospitals, hospices, and homes for the marginalized. These were places for the sick, the outcast, and the forgotten. Though the buildings have changed, the mission remains: to echo the welcome of Christ. To this day, care centers and charitable foundations across the world still bear his name, not to honor a man, but to remind the suffering that they are not beyond the reach of grace. In Scripture, the name Lazarus appears once more in the parable of the rich man and the poor beggar, Luke 16, that Lazarus was not raised from the dead, but he too was carried to the heart of God. His story, paired with the Lazarus of Bethany, forms a deeper truth. God sees both those who suffer and those who rise. In both cases, the name becomes a bridge between sorrow and salvation. Today, many people carry the name Lazarus in baptism, in ministry, in spirit. They may not be raised from tombs, but they rise each day from pain, from loneliness, from doubt. They do not seek crowds or recognition. Like their namesake, they live quietly with Christ, trusting in the power of his voice to call them out of fear and into life. In art, literature, and music, Lazarus remains a living metaphor. Songs speak of rising again. Poems recall his name in moments of turning. In every age, his story is retold by hearts longing for renewal. To name a person or a place after Lazarus is to declare that death is not the end, and that grace always has the last word. The name Lazarus is not a title of honor, it is an invitation. It is a reminder that friendship with Jesus is not reserved for the great, but offered to the faithful. To bear his name is to walk the quiet road of hope, believing that the stone will roll away and that the voice of Christ still calls us forth. Chapter 11. Lessons from Lazarus for the modern world. The story of Lazarus remains more than a miracle, it is a message. His life is proof that God can transform suffering into blessing. What began in illness and ended in a tomb became one of the greatest signs of hope the world has ever known. Lazarus reminds us that even when we feel abandoned or buried by sorrow, God's timing is perfect. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is beyond his power to redeem. Lazarus teaches us to wait in faith. His sisters sent word to Jesus, but he did not come immediately. And yet, the delay was not absence, it was preparation. In our lives, too, prayers may seem unanswered, help may feel late, but Lazarus shows us that what looks like delay may be God's deeper plan. To wait with faith is to trust that even when heaven is silent, love is still at work. True friendship with Christ does not shield us from pain. Lazarus was dearly loved by Jesus, yet he became sick and died. But the love of Christ transformed that suffering into something eternal. Lazarus shows us that friendship with God is not about comfort, it is about communion. Through every shadow, Jesus walks with us, and one day he will call each of us by name into life everlasting. To young people seeking meaning, Lazarus offers a powerful witness. He was not loud or famous. He didn't write books or lead armies. He lived quietly, faithfully, and close to the Lord. And that was enough. In a world that chases attention, Lazarus shows that greatness lies in hidden faithfulness. His story invites us to live simply, love deeply, and trust God completely, even when no one is watching. Each of us has a tomb, places of despair, fear, or shame. Lazarus reminds us that Jesus stands before every tomb and calls us to rise. Come forth, he says, not just from death, but from everything that keeps us from joy. No matter how long we've been buried, no matter how sealed the stone may feel, his voice reaches deeper. With one word, he brings us back to life. In a noisy and hurried world, Lazarus speaks in stillness. He teaches us that faith does not need to shout, it needs only to endure. While many seek miracles in the extraordinary, Lazarus shows that the greatest miracle is believing in silence, waiting in trust, and walking humbly with God. In that quiet surrender, heaven moves. More than anything, Lazarus is a symbol of hope. He is the friend of Christ, the one who came back, the one who now walks with us in spirit. For all who are weary, forgotten, or afraid, Lazarus is a companion. He does not speak many words, but his presence says enough. Death is not the end, silence is not abandonment, and in Christ, every grave is a doorway to new life. Chapter 12. A Prayer to Saint Lazarus. Saint Lazarus, you who once rested in the silence of the grave and heard the voice of Christ call you back to life, draw near to us. Teach us to believe that no darkness is stronger than the power of God, and that no hope is ever truly lost in him. Beloved friend of Jesus, You were not known as a great preacher or powerful leader, but as one who welcomed the Lord into your home and heart. Help us discover that holiness grows through friendship with Christ, faithful love, humble service, and trust in His presence. Stand beside us when our faith is tested, when our prayers seem unanswered, and when sorrow becomes difficult to carry. Remind us that Jesus never forgets our names. Even when He appears silent or delayed, His love remains near, and His saving plan is still at work. Pray for the sick, the suffering, the dying, and all who live in fear. Intercede for those who are lonely, abandoned, or buried beneath grief. May they hear within their hearts the voice of Christ calling them out of despair and leading them toward healing, peace, and hope. Saint Lazarus, teach us to trust God's timing. When the world tells us that it is too late, help us remember that the Lord acts with perfect wisdom. Give us patience to wait, courage to believe, and grace to surrender our desires to the loving will of the Father. Show us that no tomb is too dark, no burden too heavy, and no sin too great for divine mercy. You who came forth still wrapped in burial cloths, teach us to leave behind everything that binds us, and to walk each day in the freedom Christ gives. O friend of the Lord, carry our prayers before Christ and remain close to us in times of trial. Help us live as witnesses of the resurrection through faithful and loving lives. And when our earthly journey ends, may we hear Christ call our names and rise with Him to eternal life. Amen.